In 2023, India held the presidency of the G20, a global forum of the world's largest economies. Today, India celebrates a year since it successfully hosted the G20 summit in New Delhi. While the summit took place amid political turbulence and geopolitical rivalries, India stayed true to its ancient philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which means the world is one family. This wasn't just a slogan. It was a guiding principle for how India approached its presidency, aiming for inclusive growth, sustainable development, and global cooperation. Through initiatives like the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor or the IMEC, the inclusion of the African Union, and sharing its innovative India Stack technologies, India showed just how this ancient wisdom drives its conscience. So here's how India brought Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam to life during its G20 presidency. This is your host Shubhangi Sharma for CNN News 18. Let's get started. Number 1, the theme was rooted in ancient wisdom. India's G20 theme, One Earth, One Family, One Future, directly drew inspiration from the Sanskrit adage of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam taken from the Maha Upanishad. This philosophy reflects a universal view, emphasizing that the world is interconnected and everyone is part of one global family. Prime Minister Narendra Modi consistently referenced this belief in shaping G20's discussions, ensuring that collaboration, equality, and shared responsibility were at the heart of every conversation. Number 2, giving a voice to the Global South. Throughout its presidency, India made sure that the voice of the Global South, which often goes unheard in global forums, was amplified. India organized the Voice of the Global South Summit early in 2023, where developing nations could express their concerns and hopes. India's diplomatic efforts culminated in the inclusion ultimately of the African Union as a permanent member of the G20, a historic moment that truly reflected Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. It was a powerful acknowledgement that emerging economies should not be left behind and deserve equal representation at the global table. It firmly also established that the Global South is a vital constituency that must be accounted for in all arenas of global diplomacy. Number 3, sustainable development at the core. India's focus on Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam was not just symbolic, it was action-oriented. One of the key priorities for India was sustainable development, which was reflected in its G20 agenda. From advocating climate financing to accelerating inclusive growth, India pushed for a global commitment towards greener, more equitable development models. The launch of the Global Biofuel Alliance during the summit was one such step towards promoting cleaner energy sources. It demonstrated India's leadership in championing sustainability and signaling that economic progress doesn't have to come at the cost of our planet. Number 4, sharing India Stack with the world. Another way India embodied the spirit of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam was by sharing its digital innovations with the world. The India Stack, a collection of technologies like Aadhaar, UPI, and DigiLocker, were showcased to G20 leaders as an example of how technology can drive inclusive development and growth. Aadhaar has brought identity verification to over 1 billion Indians, while UPI has revolutionized digital payments even in rural areas. By showcasing these technologies to the world at the G20 summit, India offered the world practical tools to promote financial inclusion and digital empowerment. Number 5, reforming multilateral institutions. India's presidency also saw a push for reform in global multilateral institutions, particularly the development banks such as the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund (IMF). India's vision was clear. These institutions must be restructured to better serve the needs of developing countries, providing them with the resources and support required to achieve sustainable growth. This push for reform was deeply rooted, again, in the philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, as it sought to create a more equitable financial system for the benefit of all nations. Now, number 6, the IMEC launch. One of the most significant achievements of India's G20 presidency was the launch of the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor. This new trade route, likened to a modern Silk Road, links India with the Middle East and Europe through a network of rail and shipping lanes. The IMEC symbolizes India's vision of fostering global trade based on mutual benefit, with no nation left behind. Prime Minister Modi emphasized that the corridor would not only enhance economic ties but also promote connectivity and cooperation in a way that reflects the spirit of World is One. Number 7. Championing equality and equity in global governance. From day one of its presidency, India demonstrated a keen desire to reshape global governance on principles of equality and equity. This is where Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam played a crucial role. India consistently advocated for the inclusion of marginalized voices, promoting reforms in multilateral institutions such as the UN, and calling for a fairer global order. This vision was not just about economic cooperation, but also about giving every nation, regardless of its size or economic power, a seat at the decision-making table. And finally, number 8. Women-led development and inclusive growth. Women-led development was a central focus of India's G20 agenda. The idea was simple but powerful. Achieving gender equality is key to sustainable growth, and Prime Minister Modi pushed this idea over and over again. By promoting initiatives that supported women's participation in the workforce and leadership, India demonstrated how inclusive growth, inspired by the philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, can benefit everybody. Gender inclusivity was highlighted as essential to a more balanced, prosperous future. India's G20 presidency was more than just a diplomatic success, therefore. It was a manifestation of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam in action. Through initiatives like the IMEC, the inclusion of the African Union, the sharing of India's stack, and its push for sustainable development and institutional reform, India put its ancient philosophy into practice. Under Modi's leadership, India also demonstrated to the world that cooperation, inclusion, and equity are the only paths to a prosperous and sustainable future. In doing so, it reminded the world that truly we are one family.